What up, and welcome back to another Malazan Book of the Fallen video. This time we're continuing our journey with Deadhouse Gates Chapters 17 and 18. We're just banging them out now because I'm looking forward to getting it done, and also just it's getting really exciting and a lot of action happening. So let's dive in. Housekeeping wise, we're going to do the whole chapter analysis review and then talk about spoilery goodness at the end, and I'll let you know when to jump out if you haven't finished the series. So 17 kicks off with Kalam and the captain, and I don't know what it is, but I just love the guy's personality. The captain is being his normal, lovable self. He's just got a really funny communication style, and he kind of beats around the bush and talks through analogy, and it's just hilarious. The treasurer is down in the captain's cabins, and he's totally complaining again. They're being kept pace with, I guess, by two ships, and the captain essentially wants to do an immediate about face and bring the scrap to these guys, but it's obvious that somebody is trying to jack Pormqual's gold. Kalam can sense that something just isn't right on this journey, something is keeping them confused. Their memories tell them that it's only been a couple of days, but there's lots of evidence, and the captain in his roundabout way is trying to point out all of the different ways that this stuff just isn't adding up, that they're been out there much longer than it seems, and some force is just keeping them confused and keeping them in this kind of fog. And the captain seems to be just trying to warn Kalam of something or communicate something, and he just can't quite get it out. He just keeps hitting a roadblock mentally. Kalam's, of course, still super suspicious of this character, Salk Elan, and just will not join forces, and just kind of go arm in arm with Salk Elan the way that he wants. But Kalam just generally senses that something is not right. So he approaches the lieutenant of the marine company that is aboard Captain's ship as kind of the guardians of this treasure, and basically says to stay on side during the coming scrap, stay on board with this idea of continuing to fight these pirates regardless of whether the treasurer tries to kind of pull rank and make everybody surrender. Throughout the course of this conversation, they realize that he's Corporal Kalam of the Bridge Burners, and their heads essentially explode, but he basically tells them, look, you guys take care of these pirates and just stay on side that way, and when it comes down to it, I'll deal with the treasurer and the bodyguards. And it's also clear that whoever this captain is super G'd up and more than meets the eye than just this kind of aloof, weirdo captain guy, and you can tell that just by the respect that he has of the Marines, of the sailors that work for him, etc. And so they totally just bust out and smash right into one of the two pirate galleys that are there and proceed to just get into a gnarly scrap. As they're fighting, Kalam goes back to the rear and finds that the first mate, the guy who was on the steering tiller, and the captain are all down. The first two guys are dead, and the captain is trapped underneath one of the dead bodyguards. His hands have been absolutely shredded to ribbons because he had bare hand fended off the guy's tulwar in the scrap.
That look cool from down here? Because up there, it was pretty intense. My heart's pumping.
And what we find out is that this treasurer guy is essentially trying to jack Pormqual's loot. And so they defeat this first pirate galley, but the other one's still out there. The treasurer assumes command of the ship, and he wants to surrender because those are all of his homies coming up to take all this gold. And reluctantly, Kalam and Salk Elan team up to essentially take out the treasurer, who looses this Encaral thing, which Kalam just straight up takes on head to head. It's this flying dragon gnarly lizard thing, and Kalam takes it on head to head, tries to stab it. His knives aren't strong enough. He's able to really wound it bad and get it down to the ground, and then the Marines come in with spears and just absolutely finish this thing off. Meanwhile, as the Marines are taking this thing out, Kalam and Salkilan proceed to take down a group of like 10 dudes single-handedly.
Dude, that was badass.
They grab the treasurer, and Salkilan has obviously wiped out the bodyguard, but they feed him to the sharks, which was really gratifying, and then they kind of play it cool when the other pirate galley comes up like everything is in hand and going to plan, and then they storm that thing and take it down as well. Unfortunately, all of the loyal Marines die in the process, and so especially that unnamed lieutenant of the Marines who was all pumped and helped Kalam to keep control of the situation. But they did get the consolation prize of at least, again, getting to feed this treasurer guy to the sharks. But even though they've kind of, after this, subsequent to this, they've gotten rid of the treasurer and all the shady stuff, everybody's still got this like fog of war mental thing going on. And so there's still some issue looming out there. And, it kind of closes out Kalam's bit as they just continue to sail and see actually the adjunct Tavor's fleet sailing back the opposite way to retake the 7 cities, and it actually really fades to black with Kalam talking trash one last time and just taking that final shot across the bow on Salkilan. Chapter 17 does end with a little bit of a piece on Felisin, and she just seems changed in some way, since she's kind of walked through that whirlwind. And she sees the value of keeping Heboric around to kind of be that voice of reason. She essentially sees him as a source of wisdom, and even though she can't take his advice, she sees the value, I guess, in having those comments made in her presence just to keep her honest or so that she's considering them. Not really sure. But Leoman is kind of tripping out because he really wants her to look the part. And part of this comes down to his own deep-seated doubts that he has because she never opens the book. And so he wants her to wear the clothes, wear all the jewelry, and really like act the part. And I think that's just, again, symptomatic of the fact that he himself doesn't have the deep-rooted faith that maybe he once had, or maybe not, with the original Sheikh. But kind of under the hood of this 7 cities rebellion, apparently there's a lot of different factions and fragments within Sheikh's own army, and that's why Leoman is so obsessed, basically, with having her look and feel like the real Sheikh reborn. Then we enter chapter 18, and this is where the action just starts to get pretty constant, and the pace of the book really ramps up. So we have Fiddler entering the maze of Tremorlor, right? This Azath house, the roots have grown up and made this like kind of big giant maze, which they're now entering. They see all these nameless ones who are dead and basically strung up at the entrance to the maze of Tremorlor. Icarium actually recognizes these guys and calls them the priests of the Azath. And he kind of has these foggy memories about the slaughter back in Mappo's town. And so in some ways, it seems like the Nameless One was actually the one who slaughtered all of the Trell back in the original times when Mappo first becomes Icarium's guardian. And that maybe this was all kind of a ploy to motivate Mappo to take on this monumental task of kind of being Icarium's chaperone. And so this basically rocks Mappo to his, foundations, to his bedrock, right? Because these thousands of years that he's been out there chaperoning and preventing Icarium from remembering could all be ultimately based on a lie.
Oops, my bad.
Sari and Iskar Pust get into it because he contends that Amanus, or Kalenved and Dancer, essentially wiped out all of the Nameless Ones when they originally came to power. But Mappo and Icarium, say, hey, look, he might have done the ones in the areas that are actually controlled by the Empire, but obviously not all of them. She kind of has a little bit of a dust up because she's kind of assumed to be constantly either like this puppet of Shadow or this dumb, naive girl. And she's like, look, I've got possession of all these memories and skills and all of this stuff. And I'm actually like an agent making decisions. And I'm not this kind of, victim or innocent bystander that things are happening to.
It's good, bro. You don't know me. You don't. What is good? You don't know.
So Apsalar's character is getting a little bit more fleshed out, and again, she's kind of being more of having deliberate actions and things like that, or opinions, instead of just being, again, kind of like the subject of focus. But ultimately, Mappo does admit to being kind of Icarium chaperone, but he just says, look, I don't know why. I don't know if it's because this is to maintain a vow or a sign of faith to the Azath, or maybe even because they have some kind of a guilt over something they did in the past. But this Azath is just like gnarly because it's housing so many dead like gods and ascendants and soul taken, divers, etc., demons, you name it. And they can just hear them scrapping all around them. And it's just really gnarly. They round a corner and this giant bear rushes at them, but it actually rushes right past him and dives into this giant soul taken Enkaral, which is kind of like that thing that Kalam was scrapping back on the ship, except for this one is a soul taken and it's bigger and gnarlier, which Mappo just jumps in and, summarily dispatches with a gnarly blast from his mace. But actually what ends up happening is that the Hounds of Shadow jump on this bear and push him into the walls of the Azath, and he gets taken down. And it was just really sad because it actually was Mappo's friend, the bear, I think Mesrem or somebody like that, who we talked about in the very early chapters at the beginning of Deadhouse Gates. And Mappo was actually taking down this Enkaral to help his friend, and it was just super sad because actually he doesn't get taken prisoner, and Fiddler points that out, but actually one of the demons or whatever that's being imprisoned by the Azath actually chokes this bear out so that he dies instead of being a prisoner for his whole life. But Mappo's pretty crushed. Then they do get attacked by another Devers, Grillin, who turns into like thousands and hundreds of thousands of rats, and Icarium essentially loses his shit and does this keening wail, and to the point where even the Hounds of Shadow like get super scared, tuck their ears back, and like cover their genitals. And they're sitting there whimpering and stuff like that. And these are, animals that essentially took on Animander Rake back in Gardens of the Moon without even batting an eye. And so to get them, ears tucked back, whimpering, cowering, pretty gnarly. Gives you a sense of how intense the situation was.
Well, we're boned.
We then see Felisin finally enter Shake's camp. She embraces all of the orphans there of the 7 cities, including the one that she meets on the first day when she very first enters the camp, and adopts them all and decides to name them, where they had been nameless up until this time because they were just orphans and had nobody to give them names. In terms of resources, the army is actually really well provisioned. It's a huge army. She has like 40,000 troops camped out in the desert. They have all these underground aquifers, and they know where all the secret watering holes are. So they're even farming there and doing agriculture and could potentially stay there indefinitely. Hiborik, though, doesn't like it there at all. He's scared of all the ghosts. There's like all these ghosts and demons or spirits from the First Empire going way back, and he's just super freaked out by it in general. Hiborik, of course, is trash-talking Leoman and saying how he's ignorant about the Empire. Leoman shows that he actually has done a lot of his homework on the tactics and strategy that the Empire is going to use. But the bigger point is that he's like, dude, you need to shut up, because when we meet all these mages, if you're out there talking trash, that's going to cause a lot of problems for us, for Shake, for the army, etc. The big guy says, dude, let me just rip your tongue out. I hate you to death.
Just take it easy, champ. Why don't you stop talking for a while?
But again, she kind of flouts Leoman's advice, and so instead of immediately meeting with the mages, she first decides to just address the people at this big kind of public amphitheater space. And we get this kind of insight into this weird dynamic that happens between, Darajna, the goddess, and Felisin / Shake, because she flouts the ritual and doesn't open the book. and retains in some way, I guess, a part of herself by not having done that, so she doesn't, fully imbibe or whatever the whirlwind goddess, but at the same time, the goddess is able to like look into her heart and see how bad she hates the Malazan Empire, and essentially is kind of like cool with that. And so even though she doesn't take the full power and like merge essentially with the whirlwind goddess, she does get enough power to start to manipulate things where, she wasn't a mage or anything like that prior to this. So even if she doesn't get all of the goddess's power, she definitely gets some, and when her mages don't kneel, she kind of goes one by one and gets inside each one of their heads individually. And she's able to let them know, like, look, I'm not pumped by the sign of disrespect. And they're kind of a little bit haughty and like, you don't scare me. But again, she goes into their minds and lets them know what's really up and that it's really her, right? So she goes into Bidethal and is like, look, I remember when you raped me as a kid and totally messed up my plumbing so that I could never think about kids or relationships and all of that, so that I would be single-mindedly focused. And, how bad I hate you for that. And I still remember it. And he freaks out that she knows all that stuff, and she forces them to kneel. And just as an aside, it was so weird and kind of sad to me how much like Shake's experience kind of mirrors Felisin's own experience with Benneth. So, in some ways, kind of like the trusted person Bidethal does to Shake, what happens to Felisin by, both by her sister, kind of as a proxy who forces her basically to get raped by all these people, and then again by Benneth, and just a really sad parallel that I noticed this time around. She calls out Febrile, one of her other high mages, for having tried to poison her 3 times, and he always thought she never knew, and she's like, no, I knew about that shit. I also knew that you tried to backstab Dasim Ultor before you came over to my side as well, and he's pretty taken aback by her knowledge and ends up kneeling as well. Then she gets to Lorik, who in some ways seems like her most loyal subject or high mage, but then in some ways also doesn't seem that down for her. He's always done what she wanted, but he always kind of stands back and is like evaluating and waiting for her to slip up or judging or whatever. And so on the one hand, he seems like super duper powerful. And then on the other hand, he's not like zealot, religious zealot that just follows her out of blind faith. And she just kind of has to accept that. And she concludes by basically creating this giant whirlwind fountain geyser thing and carrying her whole entire army and all the, pilgrims, etc. off to put in work on the Malazans.
You tell them I'm coming! And hell's coming with me, you hear?
And then we end chapter 18 back in Tremorlor with Fiddler trying to fend off Grillin, these thousands and thousands and thousands of rats. Icarium seems like he's about to go nuclear, and so Fiddler reaches into his bag for his last cusser to take down Grillin. Except when he throws this cusser, it turns out it wasn't really a cusser. It was this conch shell from Kimlock, the Tano Spirit Walker guy that we met back in Erlatan when they were still trying to figure out which way to go, and when Fiddler and Kalam initially broke off from each other. And what happens is this song erupts out of this conch shell, because remember, that's how the Tanos do their magic, is they sing their magic. And so what happens is that it, this giant wave of water and wreckage and all this stuff washes out down through Tremorlor, takes out everything in its path, including Grillin. Mappo smashes Icarium on the head to knock him out so that he doesn't go nuclear and blow everything up, and basically everything except for that party, Soul Taken Divers, Grillin, you name it, gets wiped out by this giant Tano wave of water magic, spirit song, whatever. And now that Icarium's been incapacitated by Mappo, you have Iskar Pust really lobbying to let Tremorlor, let the Azath have Icarium. But both Mappo and Fiddler step in and are like, bro, not gonna happen. He tries to recruit Pust does, to help him do the dirty work as well, and she shuns him also. And then you see Icarium get scooped up by Mappo, like, so tenderly in his arms, and you can see that Mappo has really, like, resolved himself to sticking up for the friendship side of it, kind of mission be damned. And it's just really touching because it's this whole kind of inner conflict that he's had the whole time over thousands of years between, again, the friendship on one hand and the mission of saving the world. And now that he finds again that that was rooted potentially on a lie, and just, you know, very conflicted to the point where he opts for the friendship, but is just so torn up by it. And it's just really sad. So we're going to go ahead and leave the chapter stuff there. If you haven't finished the series, you can go ahead and jump out now, because I have just a few more minutes where I want to touch on some of the foreshadowing, spoilery stuff. So thanks for coming by, and we'll see you on the next one. So lots of crazy stuff happening in this chapter, and just overall so sad, again, seeing the whole drama play out between Mappo and Icarium, and just being conflicted about the mission, and seeing him opt for friendship. And it's almost even more bittersweet kind of seeing him commit to the friendship aspect, knowing now how that's all going to play out down the road. It's just, it hit me harder this time around for sure. But beyond that, just like, I'm curious what you guys would do. It's like, should he, you know, give him to the Azath? Should he keep his memories from him? Like, what is up with the nameless ones? Let me know down below, because I still don't know what is up with them. Are they truly the servants of the Azath? Like, are they getting direction from them? Are they just devoted to him, like worshipers, and they're trying to guess what the Azath actually want? You know, why are they trying to keep Icarium with a companion the whole time, right? What is up with that? If it's as servant suggests and they're doing it out of a sense of guilt, what are they guilty about? Are they the ones who turned Icarium loose on the Azath originally? Like, maybe they were the ones who told him that that's where his dad was imprisoned, and that was what made him kind of, you know, take out the Azath the first time and create all this crazy memory rift and all of his, you know, the source of all of his jacked up issues that he has to this day. Or I'm just curious, what's your take on the nameless ones and their relationship to the Icarium and the Azath, and what their motivations are and all of that. Also, the first time we meet Felisin the Younger, which was cool. I didn't realize that happened until later for some reason, but it was right when she first gets to Shake's encampment. And so, you know, nice to connect with her. Looking forward to seeing her again, because she ends up being actually a kind of cool character that is, you know, this orphan who kind of has this rags to riches story and gets all the education and stuff. But then we get the Fiddler Cusser saga, right? And this is really the start of the Bridge Burners' ascension, right alongside all the stuff that happens in Memories of Ice. And we know that Kimlock does end up touching his shoulder, even though he didn't give him permission. Then at the end, he kind of gives him a pat on the back or whatever, that kind of gets the whole snowball rolling for then Ganos to come in and do the blessing once, you know, most of them die during Memories of Ice. And I think those two things together are what set the stage for them to then ultimately take over that bridge to the other side. And then the last spoilery, questiony piece that I have is just in relation to Shadow Throne, and just what was he planning with Icarium? I know he thought he was making a deal to feed him to the Tremorlor, essentially to the Azath, and to be there to help defend it. But what was Shadow Throne hoping to get out of it on his end? I know what, you know, he was hoping to give. What was he hoping to get? Just the kind of sign on to continue to use that, you know, Deadhouse or whatever to travel through the Azath? Or I'm not totally clear on what he was hoping, besides, you know, he had his own motivations, obviously, of hiding the gate below his own temple. But why did he need to make a deal with Tremorlor for that? Why couldn't he have just led the false path of hands towards Tremorlor, and who cares what they thought about it? So let me know if you have any thoughts about it down there or in the Discord or whatever. So we're going to go ahead and leave it there. If you like it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, because that helps the YouTube algorithm, the YouTube gods, get this in front of more potential Malazan readers or people who have already read Deadhouse Gates. Other than that, if you like what we're doing, you can support the channel. You know, any way you want. You can subscribe. That always helps. Turn on those notifications so that you never miss a video. Join the Discord. Buy some merch. Become a patron. Become a member. Share this video on your Facebook with other Malazan nerds like me. And you can do that, and we certainly appreciate it. So we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. Until the next time, happy reading.